my name is Mats Andersson, and I'm a game designer of Fat Shark, heading up the action team. So we do all the weapons and enemies and abilities and like in-game action bits.
So talk about what you guys are showing here new with Vermintide, the Winds of Magic.
So the Winds of Magic is kind of a collective of stuff we've been working on. It's an expansion for the game, so we want to make it slightly bigger than a like normal DLC, and it's focused on this concept of Winds of Magic. That is a kind of staple of the Warhammer world, where the power of magic flows from the north down, and it's divided into 8 different colors or different aspects of magic. Now, what we want to do is basically create an end game loop for the players. So we'll be presenting consecutive challenges using slightly shorter level segments, but infuse those with that magic, present like a magical, it might be fire or it might be life, which is like the green regenerative thing going. Have specific objectives for that, specific set enemy spawns and challenges, and ask you to complete those on time and with as little damage taken as possible.
Essentially modifiers for run-throughs.
Yeah. So I mean, each win will bring a specific mutator into play that changes the overall kind of gameplay loop for you, and that in combination with the different objectives and the different specific enemy spawns allows us to kind of narrate really specific challenges. So I mean, whenever we do something, we try to kind of take both new players and old players and master players into account. So we want to create this thing where like it is a pure and nice experience just viewing and playing the game through the different Winds of Magic from the start of the weaves that we call them, moving on to kind of a progression-based completionist thing where you get to complete each and every weave after each other, and then at the end we're going to have some high-peaking, challenging things that will kind of really push the level of mastery you can achieve in the game. And hopefully it will be awesome.
You guys are also introducing, you guys have Skaven, of course, in the game, obviously, and you guys introduced in Vermintide too, cultist and chaos spawns and stuff like that, mainly Nurgle, and now you guys are introducing Beastmen to the lore.
Yeah. So together with the weaves and the Winds of Magic kind of part of it, we're also doing a complete set of Beastmen. So for us that means both a kind of a roamer population, as we used to call it, which is basically a horde enemy, a set of base enemies and some elites that can populate entire levels. So we create a set that we can reuse for any level we want to have them on, and just kind of replace the Skaven population or the Chaos population. We're also looking at mixing and matching. So with the roamer set, what we're having is the Gore, which is the basic Beastman, but he will be the kind of expression of the Beastmen, because they are wild and they are fierce and they are horrible in and of themselves. The Bestigor is the big armored version of that. He will charge into combat and kind of disrupt the gameplay loop. So he will put everyone on their asses, enemies and players alike, and just create that loop where you need to be on the lookout for him. The Angors, that are the kind of smaller horde enemies, we tweak them into more of a skirmisher role. So we give the baseline horde enemies spears and a bit more range. So you will have to position and push towards them in order to actually combat them effectively. And then we have the roamer population of the Angors. They will be featuring some archers and bows, which is kind of a first for the gameplay series, but they add an additional layer of keeping a lookout for what you're facing and actually splitting up the team, because someone needs to go and deal with that. For bosses, we have a huge Minotaur, Berserker, angry dual axe wielding Minotaur guy that just charges into combat and does his thing. And then we had some specials where we try to focus on the buffing and mutation of gameplay, kind of similar to the stuff we're doing in Winds of Magic, but he will have a standard, a totem that he plants, and that will kick this into effect. And then it's up to the players to actually push forwards and remove the standard to remove the buff. So combined, they do that thing where we suddenly kind of shift the gameplay into a more kind of forcing players to push towards the enemy thing, and they add quite a bit of niceness to the game.
So how do you guys, for example, like you're introducing, like you said, Beastmen and all their different mechanics and subgenres, but how do you guys decide what race you want to implement into Vermintide 2 and its DLC, like what enemies you want to use?
So it's basically a big brawl at the office, since most of us are kind of Warhammer nerds. So we have like the game director and the executive producer and me. I've played orcs since '95 or something. So we usually end the discussion with a big argument. And I've been saying we should be doing orcs for 4 years. I haven't had my way yet. And now we're doing Beastmen. It's down to our game director. After that point, everyone's kind of on board, since if you're a Warhammer nerd, you kind of love all parts of Warhammer to a degree. So we take that and break it down and move over to a much more boring, dry, kind of theoretical perspective, where we look at what kind of palette do we have for our enemies, what can we actually bring to the table to shift and change the gameplay loop. But since this is a 4-player co-op game, we want to respect the kind of rhythm of the game. So we don't want to go too far and create like a dueling enemy or something that will have one player face off against one enemy for 5 minutes while the rest of the team is just standing by going golf applause. We want to have something that just kind of makes it a bit different and introduces a new tactic that you kind of need to employ. Because the game features a vast amount of enemies, so we group stuff into threats. So if there's Ungors, that is the threat. If it's 10 or 15 or 20, it's an ongoing threat until they're gone. If there's Archers, that's another threat that should have a different tactic to it, but they shouldn't break the mold, because it's the combination of enemies, right, that kind of makes everything tick.
So what's next for your studio? Are you guys going to continue to do Warhammer IP? Are you guys going to do your own game? Like, what do you guys want to work on now?
So the main thing that we all know we want to do is continue to support Vermintide 2 for at least a bunch of years more. That's the plan. We want a long tail on this. So part of that work has gone into the Winds of Magic. It's basically us building a platform for live services that we can have a format that enables us to be much more predictable, much more tighter with our deadlines, and actually push content through. Since building huge narrative levels, that's a big endeavor, and building these more challenged focused things, that might be something that we can pull off with a bit more predictability and actually like keep to our plans. Otherwise, I mean, FetchArk is a privately held and company, and we're self-funded. So all
your own company, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, all decisions are made in-house, which is super great for a lot of things, but it also means things change quite rapidly. So there are plans for other things. They're not far gone at all, since everyone's kind of occupied with Vermintide currently, and it's kind of hard to get people away from that, because everyone's like, we want to add this and we want to add that. And I mean, that goes for both Beastmen and Chaos and the Skaven. Like, we have a long list of enemies that we want to do to set up. Same goes for weapons and characters and everything. It's just a matter of finding the time and finding the kind of reality to make that happen.
It's just such a huge, lush, deep universe. I mean, like you said, like the orcs have a variety of enemies, multiple enemies, 10, 20, like 25 different enemies.
Right, yeah, totally.
You're too smart, though.
No, that's fine. You can play as orcs instead. It would be super nice.
I would like to see some orcs and some dakas and stuff come in and just like wreck stuff up. I would rather see vampire accounts.
But I mean, I think that comes to the core of why we're doing Vermintide from the get-go. I mean, at least 50% of the studio are Warhammer nerds, and the large motivation for actually making the game is like, we want to make Warhammer but do it properly. I mean, it's way more about that than like, oh, how can we monetize or make the most money out of stuff? If we were doing that, we would probably be doing something else. So when it comes to making these kind of creative decisions of bringing new factions in or doing certain things, we want to keep those in line with what we actually can make good enough. We don't want to just like, well, put a fucking skin on him and make it happen, because we want to do it properly. And that goes for new characters and new content and new enemies and new weapons or whatever.
So when does Winds of Magic come out?
When it's done is the super official thing, but summer as it looks now, that's definitely what we're aiming for. And it's looking quite good.